Ice cream used to be the safest thing in your freezer, or so we thought. But what if I told you that some of the most popular brands right now have been quietly linked to food, recalls, hospitalizations, even deaths, and yet they're still sitting pretty on your grocery shelf? In the last 3 months alone, over 100,000 cartons of ice cream were yanked from schools and stores across America due to listeria plastic shards and allergen mislabeling. One batch even caused 3 people to die from a bacteria you can't taste or smell, and that's just what's been officially reported. So the question is not whether your ice cream is clean. The real question is how many brands are hiding behind nostalgia packaging and fake promises. How many of them are cashing in on your trust one scoop at a time? Let's break down the 5 names to stay far away from. And yes, don't worry, we'll show you 2 that are actually safe. Number 1. Bluebell. Bluebell is back in the headlines, and not for a new flavor. Just a few weeks ago, one of their products was pulled off shelves because it was packed into the wrong container. A container with no mention of nuts on the label. Think about that. A nut-laced ice cream sold as something completely innocent. No allergy warning, no clear label. Just a quiet recall tucked away where nobody would notice. And this isn't about a one-time mix-up. This is about how a brand with a known history of deadly contamination is still slipping through the cracks of our food system. How in 2025, Bluebell products are still being distributed to public schools, nursing homes, and major retailers without any structural oversight. Because here's the truth, the way food recalls work in this country gives brands every advantage. Most of them are voluntary and barely publicized. There's no loud announcement at checkout, no national alert. Just a PDF quietly uploaded somewhere hoping nobody reads it. So when Bluebell gets flagged again this time for risking lives through allergen mislabeling, it's not treated like a red flag. It's treated like a paperwork error. Fix it, move on, keep selling. But the implications are real. Nut allergies don't give second chances. One spoonful of the wrong product can lead to seizures, respiratory collapse, even death. And yet Bluebell's mislabeling didn't trigger a government investigation, a brand audit, or a supply chain freeze. It triggered nothing. Why? Because this isn't just about Bluebell. It's about a system that rewards compliance on paper while ignoring the human cost. A system where trusted brands get second, third, and fourth chances, while the rest of us get generic press statements and empty apologies. And let's not forget how these products are sold. The branding is all soft colors and family memories. The language is classic homemade farm fresh. But what's actually inside the carton is the result of industrial scale production, minimum cost ingredients, and glaring gaps in accountability. So if you're thinking about tossing one into your cart this week, ask yourself, is it worth gambling your child's health on a brand that keeps getting flagged and keeps getting away with it? Because this isn't about ice cream anymore. It's about how far a company can push before we finally say enough. Number 2. Friendly's ice cream. Friendly's used to carry a certain charm. Pastel packaging, familiar fonts, the kind of brand that felt like part of American life for decades. But here's what gets lost behind that nostalgic image. In 2025, Friendly's made a mistake that should never happen in any food system claiming to protect its consumers. Their cookies and cream ice cream ended up in vanilla bean containers. That doesn't sound alarming until you realize what was missing. The vanilla bean label didn't list soy, it didn't list wheat, 2 of the most common allergens in the country. And just like that, a product capable of triggering dangerous reactions was sitting in freezers across multiple states wrapped in a false sense of safety. But the real issue goes far beyond a misprint. It's how easily that mistake made it to shelves. The batch wasn't distributed by Friendly's directly. It passed through UNFI, one of the largest food distributors in the country. That means Friendly's isn't just part of a supply chain. It's part of a system so big, so scattered that basic safety can fall through the cracks and no one is held responsible. This kind of error doesn't only threaten people with allergies, it breaks trust for everyone who still bothers to read labels, who still believes in regulation, who still thinks someone is watching out for them. Because the minute a label lies, everything you thought you knew becomes a guess. And Friendly's reaction, a recall, yes, but barely a whisper. No press conference, no bold admission of guilt, no offer of support to those affected, just a product quietly removed, a few cartons accounted for, and a return to business as usual. The tone is always the same: minor mistake, fully contained, nothing to worry about. But let's step back. This is a brand that operates across hundreds of retailers, that moves products through vast warehouses into school districts, hospitals, and senior care homes. And when an allergen mislabeling happens, we are expected to believe only a few hundred containers were affected, only a tiny batch, only a specific lot. That's the narrative you get when accountability is inconvenient. Behind Friendly's smiling logo is a structure that leans on familiarity and low prices to stay relevant. But that doesn't excuse a system where accuracy is optional and public communication is minimal. This isn't about a single error. It's about what that error reveals, that in 2025 brands still assume you're not paying attention, that a label is just packaging, not protection, that a mistake can be buried under technical language and a few quiet refunds. Friendly's wants to be the brand you trust, but the more you look closely, the more that trust starts to melt. And when even the label can't be trusted, what exactly are you bringing home? Number 3, Rich's Ice Cream. If you're buying ice cream for schools, hospitals, or care homes, skip Rich's. Just skip it. This is not the brand you want in institutional freezers. And not because it's expensive or hard to find, but because it's one of the clearest examples of how food made for the most vulnerable people can be the most poorly controlled. Rich's Ice Cream was recently pulled from shelves after a listeria scare that sent shockwaves through state-run facilities. Their ice cream cups, commonly used in school lunch programs and patient meals, were found to be potentially contaminated. Over 100,000 individual units had to be recalled. These weren't luxury pints sitting in premium aisles. These were low-cost, mass-distributed products that made their way into public cafeterias and nutrition programs. And here's the part that should make anyone uneasy. Rich's is not a household name. It doesn't need to be. The brand exists behind supply chains, behind contracts, behind layers of food service bureaucracy. Parents don't choose it, patients don't request it, but it still ends up in their meals served with a plastic spoon and a nod of institutional trust. That is where the danger lies. Because the average consumer won't even know what Rich's is, won't hear about the recall, won't know they've eaten a recalled product. And the system is built that way, with just enough silence to keep the flow going, just enough paperwork to keep the scrutiny away. And while the brand did issue a recall, it stopped short of transparency. No national announcement, no attempt to explain how a bacteria like listeria, which can cause fatal infections in pregnant women, newborns, and the elderly, found its way into factory-sealed cups meant for mass distribution. No restructuring, no public accountability. Rich's continues to operate quietly within the food service industry, protected by the very scale that should be reining them in. This is a brand that thrives in invisibility. It doesn't rely on consumer loyalty. It relies on contracts, government bids, wholesale deals that favor low cost and high volume over ingredient integrity or facility hygiene. And the tragedy is that this kind of contamination isn't rare. It's recurring. It happens again and again because once a company becomes embedded in public food systems, removal becomes politically inconvenient and logistically complex. So if you're assuming the food served in your child's school or your parents' care home has been vetted, tested, and inspected, remember this: Rich's made it in. Rich's was recalled. Rich's is still here. And next time the warning might come too late. Stay sharp. These aren't just brands, they're systems. And the more invisible they are, the more damage they do. Number 4, Breyers. If you're still reaching for Breyers because it looks natural, it's time to read deeper than the front of the carton. This is a brand that has spent years polishing an image of simplicity. Black and white packaging, soft vanilla, claims talk of fresh cream and real ingredients. But in 2025, those words mean less than ever, because behind that clean look is one of the clearest cases of corporate bait and switch in the ice cream aisle. Breyers once had a short ingredient list. That used to be their thing. Just milk, cream, sugar, and maybe a splash of vanilla extract. But over time, as profits took priority and formulations quietly shifted, their ingredient lists stretched into the double digits. You'll now find additives like carrageenan mono and diglycerides, and even frozen dairy dessert in place of real ice cream. A legal reclassification that lets them cut corners without telling you directly. And that frozen dairy dessert term, it's not just semantics. It means the product contains too little actual cream to legally qualify as ice cream. But Breyers doesn't stop selling it next to real ice cream. They just let the confusion work in their favor. Quiet label changes, visual design that stays the same, and a whole shelf of consumers who think they're getting what they always got. It's not an accident. It's a strategy. Owned by multinational giant Unilever, Breyers isn't just a brand. It's a commodity in a global portfolio. And when costs need to be cut, formulas change. When margins shrink, so does quality. The problem is, nobody tells the public, and legally they don't have to. You're left holding a container that says vanilla, but delivers vegetable gums thickeners and dairy byproducts. Worse, Breyers continues to dominate shelf space in budget grocery chains where price often outweighs transparency. The people most affected are the ones looking for affordable treats that won't poison their pantry. Instead, they're being fed a product that no longer matches the branding, the tradition, or the trust it once earned. And yet Breyers thrives. Because regulators don't require clear front label explanations when a product gets downgraded. Because distributors still treat it like premium stock. Because millions of consumers still think they're choosing the clean option in a sea of junk. What Breyers teaches us is that not all deception is loud. Sometimes it's slow and quiet. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, not through bacteria or recalls, but through loopholes in the law that allow brands to deliver less while promising more. So yes, Breyers may still look familiar, but what's inside that carton has changed. And if you haven't read the fine print lately, you're probably not eating what you think you are. Number 5, Turkey Hill. If you see Turkey Hill on sale and think you're getting a safe, wholesome deal, step back for a second. This is one of those brands that banks heavily on its Pennsylvania roots, family farm feel, and homespun reputation. But what's really inside the tub tells a different story in 2025. Just this year, Turkey Hill was forced to recall hundreds of cartons of chocolate marshmallow ice cream. Why? Because metal shavings were discovered in the product. Not mold, not mislabeling, but actual shards of metal that made it into a frozen dessert sold in major retail chains across the country. That kind of contamination doesn't happen from a fluke. It points to systemic failure in equipment maintenance and inspection protocols, and an internal oversight. Yet the public only hears about it once the product has already reached thousands of freezers. But this isn't about metal alone. Turkey Hill's biggest red flag is how rapidly the brand has expanded without adjusting its quality controls to scale. Since being acquired by a private equity firm in recent years, Turkey Hill has undergone aggressive growth. New flavors, bigger distribution deals, entry into major grocery giants coast to coast. The problem is when profit margins become the priority, safety sourcing and transparency tend to fall off the table. The company's ingredient sourcing has grown increasingly murky. Many of their so-called natural products contain synthetic flavorings, thickeners, and cheap stabilizers that barely pass under the radar. Add to that an increased reliance on co-packers, third-party manufacturers, producing under Turkey Hill's label, and what you get is a fragmented production chain that nobody is truly accountable for. The more hands involved, the easier it is to dodge blame when things go wrong. And what does that mean for you? It means the tub of ice cream that ends up in your cart might not even come from a Turkey Hill facility. It could be made in a plant 2 states away, using machinery that's overdue for maintenance under a contract that prioritizes volume over safety. And legally, no one has to tell you any of that. Turkey Hill continues to present itself as a down-home brand. But the truth is, this is now a data-driven, profit-maximizing machine wrapped in nostalgia. They benefit from the same regulatory gaps that allow industrial food players to operate behind layers of legal insulation. So even when something dangerous shows up in the product like pieces of metal, the response is always the same: limited recall, no long-term accountability, and a fast return to market. At a glance, Turkey Hill may look like the kind of brand that keeps things simple, but simple doesn't mean safe. And when the same container can carry both a smile and a safety hazard, it's time to stop giving the benefit of the doubt. Before we go any further, take a breath. Because not every scoop is a trap, and not every brand is playing games with your trust. Some names still mean what they say, still put quality before shortcuts. And if you've been watching your freezer with suspicion, here's one you can reach for without flinching. Number 1. Tillamook ice cream. Tillamook stands out not just for what it puts in its ice cream, but for what it refuses to compromise on. This is one of the rare national brands that still operates like a co-op. Farmer-owned, Oregon-based, built around a supply chain they actually control, not just rent on paper. That means no mystery facilities, no outsourced factories, no silent handoffs to shadow manufacturers 2 states over. Their ingredient list reads like food not filler, milk, cream, sugar, real fruit, vanilla from actual beans. No high fructose syrup, no fake thickeners, no vague flavorings hiding behind loopholes. The texture is rich because they use more butter fat. The flavor hits because it's not diluted with gums or air, and it matters especially now when most brands are quietly cutting corners while raising prices. Tillamook is also one of the few brands transparent about their sourcing. They tell you where their dairy comes from. They tell you what they feed their cows. They invest in sustainability, not because it's trendy, but because it's built into how they operate. They're not chasing Wall Street. They're not padding margins for investors. They're trying to make something honest, and it shows. More than that, they've resisted the pull of the private equity churn. They haven't been swallowed up by food conglomerates. They haven't stripped down operations to please shareholders. That independence is rare, and it makes a difference in the way they respond to feedback, in the way they handle recalls, in the fact that they rarely ever need to. In 2025, trusting a brand means more than just liking the taste. It means knowing who's behind the curtain, how they treat their workers, where their raw materials come from, and whether they're willing to lose $1 to keep you safe. Tillamook is far from perfect. But compared to the chaos of corporate ice cream, it's one of the last ones standing that still feels real. And in a freezer full of noise, that kind of clarity is worth holding on to. Number 2, Strauss Family Creamery. The biggest win with Strauss Family Creamery is simple and rare. Every single ice cream they sell is certified organic. Not half organic, not technically organic, not hidden behind shady labels. Full transparency, full accountability. And that alone sets them apart in a sea of corporate misdirection. In a world where brands stretch definitions and hide behind labeling loopholes, Strauss does the opposite. They label proudly. Their dairy comes from cows raised on pasture, not hormones. Their cream is thick and clean, not engineered in labs. Their sugar organic cane, not corn syrup, hidden in plain sight. Every ingredient is chosen for integrity, not shelf life. That's why when you taste their ice cream, it doesn't feel mass-produced, it feels honest. But here's what truly locks them in as one of the safest choices in 2025. They don't contract out production. They don't run ghost facilities. They make everything in their own certified creamery in Northern California. That means tighter controls, higher standards, and zero tolerance for shortcuts. And when you look at recent recalls across the industry, metal shards, allergen mix-ups, listeria contamination, it's painfully clear how much that control matters. Strauss is also one of the few brands actively pushing back against the monopolies that dominate American food. They've spoken out publicly against factory farming, artificial growth enhancers, and the hollowing out of the organic standard by corporate interests. They don't just meet the baseline. They go further. Regenerative farming, closed-loop systems, glass packaging that cuts out microplastics completely. No trendy claims, just systems that work. And it's not a small startup with limited reach. Strauss has grown smartly, not recklessly. You can find them at co-ops, Whole Foods, and select regional grocers. Not because they paid for placement, but because demand followed quality. And unlike most companies chasing national expansion at any cost, they've chosen to stay regional to protect consistency. That's rare. That's intentional. Strauss isn't ice cream for everyone. It costs more. It's harder to find. But it's real. And in 2025, real is worth chasing. Because once you've seen how deep the dysfunction runs in this industry, you don't need more flavor options. You need one brand you can trust. Strauss might just be that one. Before you head to the freezer aisle again, remember this ice cream isn't just dessert anymore. It's become a test of trust. A product that used to mean joy now hides risks behind shiny lids and sugar-coated slogans. What you choose to scoop says a lot about how far you're willing to let these companies push your limits. So don't just shop with your cravings. Shop with your eyes open. Ask what's behind the label. Question the silence. And next time, give your freezer something it can be proud of, because a sweet treat should never come at the cost of your peace of mind.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.